And we end up saying things like, you're the marketing person. I guess it's up to you, right? I guess I'll trust you. Marketing is not a black box. The CFO should be able to understand the creative brief. How do I find a strategist to be my marketing leader? And the problem is compounded by the fact that we don't really know how to tell if someone's strategic. Like, how do you tell if they're strategic in a interview? Everybody has made decisions at high levels or has taken a plan that worked and brought it somewhere else and it worked. And so how do you actually know? Because you're going to spend a whole lot of money on this person. And you got to make sure that this person is someone who actually knows how to work top down, knows how to build strategy from scratch, and understands why and how the plan works, and knows how to develop it and can explain it to the C-suite. I can't imagine building a plan and then not having it be something I can run by the C-suite. Having a plan that I'm not able to ask for input from the C-suite. So many marketers are scared to ask for that input and that help because they think we get bad results if we talk to the C-suite because they're not going to understand it. They're not going to understand all our assumptions and all our marketing knowledge or whatever. They don't know how social media works, right? A CFO should be able to understand your creative brief, and they should be able to understand the assumptions, even if they don't agree with the assumptions, even if you do have data that shows that this thing works that they don't have, you should still be able to explain it to them and say, okay, and then have them say, well, I don't think it's going to work because of this. And then you can say, okay, well, here's how we're testing it. And then if it doesn't work because of that, we'd expect to see it in this part of the data. It takes more than just experience to be able to say things like that, though. There's a big difference between someone who's really intelligent and has a big short-term memory, and then someone who is a strategist. In fact, when I did my creative research in grad school, my research was based on this idea that, creativity happens in the short-term memory, whatever. And then I found out that it didn't happen in the short-term memory. The truth is the short-term memory has a very limited role in strategy and creativity. Creativity happens in the long-term memory. It happens, it's an investment over years, because good creatives are people who they understand how things work and they understand why things work. And so a good example, I think happened to me. I was in Oregon, it's rainy, right? And so I had trouble getting in my door, right? So you have someone who, it's raining, your lock has been sticking and now it won't turn, it won't budge. And so, but you have two different kinds of people in that same situation. Someone who is a short-term problem solver working with a short-term memory, they're not necessarily a creative person. They're going to be like, all right, well, I need to call a locksmith, or I need to, do something else that I've done before that I know works, right? Or like go buy some liquid graphite or whatever, right? And spray it in there because I know liquid graphite is what you use to fix this kind of thing. And so, but then there's another person who is that kid in class when they were in school and they were like, they were bored because the teacher's boring, they're not trying to memorize it's going to be on the test or anything like that. They're just bored, right? They're a creative type. So they, when they learned about a pencil, they're like, oh, wow. They're not like, oh, it's used for writing. They're like, oh, the pencil. Oh, it's like wood, has like lead, but it's really graphite, right? And then there's a rubber eraser. And then they may have even used it for other things, right? Hacked it into something else. I don't know. But you get older and you're in the situation where you can't get in your door. And then you're like, well, what would I use I'd use graphite. I mean, I have graphite, I have a pencil, or I have pencil lead. And so you're like, oh, I have a pencil in my backpack. So you pull out the pencil, you shove the pencil and you break off the lead in the lock and you shove it in, start moving it around. And then you work the key around and now you fix your lock and you're in the house. So it's a much different way of thinking than, it's almost like the kids who took the time to muse on the things that were common and important. They're the ones who you want to be your strategists. They're the ones who you want to be your creatives. Now, creatives can be random. They can muse on things that don't matter, but then they can also muse on things that do matter. For me, my issue was for a long time, my mom always told me I was smart, and I guess I kind of believed it. But one of the definitions, one of the characteristics of a really intelligent person is a large short-term memory. And that probably has implications on long-term learning and things like that too. But I had to learn to deal with a small short-term memory because I can't hold a bunch of things that are not organized in my short-term memory. I just can't. They have to be connected and organized. And so what I have to do, not because I want to be smart, because I want to be strategic, just because the only way I can deal with problems is to understand what's really going on here. What's the most important thing I need to pay attention to, and what's downstream from that, and then create those relationships. And luckily, I think geometry came naturally, which is part of that. Plato, I think it was, he had a school and it said, if you don't have geometry, you can't enter here. So there are those of us who are like, we come at it because we can't do it the way really smart people do it. But it makes you a strategist, and it makes you potentially a creative. It makes you someone who, if you have the other skills, can do those kinds of things. And so that's where I encountered it in my research. Now, that actually happened to me. I wasn't locked out of my house, but I fixed a lock by breaking off the pencil lead in the lock and then moving it around, and then, working it around once I got it to work, and then it lubricated the whole lock from a pencil lead. Most leaders say they want to hire someone strategic. They want to hire someone with strategy skills. And there's a good reason for that, is because you have to be able to customize everything. You have to be able to respond when things don't work out. You have to be able to adjust. And then you have to be able to make a plan that works with the strengths of the company and the culture. So there's a lot there. I mean, if you're around branding very much, if you understand the kind of a big picture company, the forces that are working within a company that affect marketing, you understand that there's branding and culture. You understand that there's thought leadership based on strengths and based on the ability to do theory and philosophy to be able to help people understand what your company does and the difference between you and other companies. And then you have to be able to understand the audience. Well, you have to understand the sales cycle. Are we B2B led, or are we one to many, like SaaS? How do we support our salespeople? How do we ingest new information, whether quantitative or qualitative, from out there and then into our strategy? How do we know when to initiate those conversations with research? How do we measure what we did? And then when we find out that it's not working, we know what to try. And that's where the real marketing experience plus strategic thinking comes into play. It's not just experience, because if you just have experience, all you're going to say is, when that happened, we did this and it worked. Or you're going to go to GPT or AI or whatever, and you're going to get a too simple answer. And you're not going to be able to build it into like, what's our theory about what went wrong based on our strategy? Which assumption is wrong? Or maybe there wasn't an assumption, or there probably was an assumption that was wrong somewhere, even if it was unstated. But you're be able to ask these questions and then come up with intelligent responses to the question. And so in my experience, most leaders don't actually know what it means to hire strategic, or even how to recognize strategy within the hiring, in the interview, within the hiring pool. Because strategy doesn't show up the way people think it does. It's not confidence, right? You don't look the part. Just because you watched all these Hallmark movies and the marketing lady looks like this and sounds like this, that doesn't mean looking the part. A lot of times people come in, they ask real hard hitting questions, they're real focused and everything. But that's a smokescreen. It can't just be confidence you're looking at. And it's not how polished they sound. It's not that either. All those things are probably good, because if someone's confident, they're probably going to take responsibility for what happens, and that's good. If they have experience is necessary. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. And so experience is good. And then how polished they sound, that's good too, because now, they're going to be concise. Hopefully they'll be good at reporting, and they'll be able to speak clearly about problems. But in the interview, people sound like this, and then at the back end, they don't. Once you start working on a strategy, once they start questioning your assumptions, once you're questioning their assumptions, sometimes that goes away. And that same confidence that made you excited to hire them, that same confidence bullies you, and it makes you feel like, well, you're the marketing person. I guess I'll take your word for it, right? But you don't ultimately have that much confidence anymore, just because they have confidence. That experience they had that made you want to hire them, now it turns into assumptions, right? They do probably have some understanding of why they think it worked, but how deep is that understanding? Because most people don't take that understanding very deep. They don't interrogate why something worked enough. And then how polished they are, that same polish, can make you think, oh, there's no problem here. But you don't want someone who can push things through with their confidence, makes assumptions based on their experience with a different company, in a different market, or even if it's kind of the same market. You don't want those assumptions coming. You don't want the polish that hides problems. And so the real question is, how do you tell if someone is actually strategic or not? And I think we're going to talk about that. So you're interviewing someone for a leadership role, right? So maybe you're like, hey, we have good clients, but growth is slow. Our leads are inconsistent, and competitors all sound the same. They all offer the same thing. Our customers don't know what makes us different. And that's why the growth is slow. And so then some people will start answering immediately. It's a bad sign. Some people are going to start asking questions, and that's the good sign. And right there, immediately you learn a lot because they're asking questions and they're not saying, here's what you do. Because someone at that point who's saying, here's what you do, they don't know what your problem is. And so good clients, growth is slow, leads are inconsistent, competitors all sound the same. What they should be asking is a few questions. And the real question is, do they slow down? Do they say, all right, hold on a second. This could be a host of problems, right? They're not rushing to an answer. They're asking things like, hey, my first question is, why do you think that is? They should be asking questions like, where do the deals normally come from? Who are these people who actually decide to buy? Who are your best clients? Who are your best customers? Where do you tend to lose the deals at? And then what do customers say about you? Like, what do they say about you? And how can you tell how the market feels about you? And so these people aren't trying to sound smart necessarily. They're trying to understand the problem. And I'll tell you, so many people just use these complicated words. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I know that's a word and I know what it kind of means because I've heard a lot of people use it, but I've never heard people use it that consistently. So now what I want to know is, what do you think that means? I don't like using industry specific words because I really think that one of the problems with the creative industry and with marketing is that we use way too many words. We don't know what they mean. We're trying to sound smart, and that breaks down communication and conversation. The number of questions, the quality of questions someone asks you is more important than anything else, because curiosity is one of the biggest things in strategy. Because someone who is trying to smokescreen you will answer the questions and hope you don't ask any more, and will just try to give you short answers, and you don't really learn much. You just see a lot of confidence and experience, and you're like, okay, well, and hopefully you don't hire them based on that. Okay, so here's what you do then. Then you change the situation. They're giving you all kinds of like feedback and stuff, or maybe hopefully they're asking questions. So now you change the situation and you add a piece of information they didn't have before. So you might say like, well, most of our best deals come from referrals, right? Which is probably, if you're a thought leader in the industry, you're doing really good work. That might actually be true. And they maybe should already know that, or should have assumed that, but then watch them and then see if they keep pushing their idea. Because what you're doing is you're giving them new information. What you're testing is their ability to see, like, say they're working for you for real. And then you have like, all right, we're running this campaign. And then they get information saying like, hey, it's not working exactly how we thought. It's working differently than we thought. What are you going to do to adjust? Are you able to take feedback and then change the plan based on new information? Or are you stuck in your frame and you can't change it? You're stuck in your way of doing things. And to you, everything's a nail. You have a hammer, everything's a nail. And so then watch what they do. Because some people will push the same idea and then others stop and say, wait, why referrals? What's different about these customers? What do they see that others don't? What do they understand about you that other people don't? And that tells you so much about who you're talking to. I'm going to guess like, I don't know if your brand is good, but I know that you do good work, and I know that people trust you, and I know that people say good things about you. I want to know why. Why do they say good things about you? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to identify the weak spots. I want to know, is it a brand problem? Because here's what I'm hearing. People like you when they work with you, but they're not understanding who you are before that. So I'm thinking brand and thought leadership, and maybe a lack of media, right? A lack of telling people that in the right place. But those are my assumptions, and I'm probably not going to volunteer that right away. I'm probably going to ask questions that help you talk, like probably open it up and say, like referrals. So, wow, that's interesting. There's opportunity there. How do we make more of it? Because that's what I'm thinking, right? And so you tell me, you start telling, you start saying, well, here's why we think referrals are, and they can develop that with you. They're working with you now in developing your strategy, or at least developing a philosophy of your company and what needs to happen. And so, and then try this too. Tell them, as soon as they tell you like, here's what I would try. Now I can tell you, I've heard this so many times from people who they executed on something really poorly. And then they said, oh, we tried it. It didn't work. Right. And they're not willing to try it again. Because my question is, why didn't it work? You have the Wile Coyote problem, potentially. I want to rule out the Wile Coyote problem. That problem is this. You try something and it almost works except for some weird thing that happened. But if you tried it again, that weird thing definitely will not happen again. It was a fluke, and you will catch the roadrunner this next time, right? I mean, think about how many times in Wile Coyote tried something and there was some freak event. The train came or something, right? Through the mountain, I don't know, like out of the middle of the mountain and ran him over, right? And it's like, okay, that doesn't happen in any other of his scenarios. So why would we think that if he tried the same thing one more time, the same way, at the same place even, it would work, right? Why would we not think that? He'd be eating Roadrunner. We wouldn't have a show to watch. It would be horrible. That's probably why he didn't do it. We tried it already. It didn't work, right? We have to stop and slow down and say, okay, because some people are just going to defend their idea. Other people want to know why. What didn't work about it? What did you see that you didn't, how did you measure it, right? When did you try it? Was it a seasonal thing? Was there something different that it was going on at that point? And so this is usually the dividing line. You don't want someone who's going to defend their ideals all the time. You want someone who's going to work with you and ask you questions, because really they're interviewing you too. They want to find out, is this someone who I'm going to be able to work with? Or is this just someone who's like, oh, we tried it before, it didn't work, right? But if you're like, hey, we tried it before and it didn't work, and they're like, okay, well then why? And if you have some understanding of why, and you're able to be flexible, now you're working together, right? You're showing that you can work together. Now you have to be willing to be flexible and work with them, because what good is a strategist if you're just going to tell them what to do all the time, right? What you want is someone who doesn't need you to tell them to do it that way all the time, because you're sharing with them, you're opening up and you're sharing with them. Really, you want someone you can open up to. And you're sharing all your assumptions and your curiosities and like, hey, maybe we didn't do it right before. And they're like, cool, right? Like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to hold that over you, right? You want a partner. You want someone who's like, yeah, cool. Yeah, we've all been there. Let me tell you about some of the crazy, stupid marketing stuff I've done, right? You want someone who can engage with the ideas, who's fun to work with, who you want to be talking to a lot. And so curiosity, I mean, it's really just the biggest thing, right? Are they curious, or are they just going to curious people? They're not afraid to expose maybe something they don't know, or they're not afraid to look like maybe they don't know for the sake of letting you talk and letting, getting the information from you and finding out what you think the problem is. Smart marketers know perception is reality, and we want to know what you think. I want to know what you think, because I'm walking into a situation I don't know. And the best thing I can do is make sure that I am keeping the things working that are working. I do not want to trash anything. I want to keep it working, and I want to measure it. And then I want to find out how to grow it. And then I want to find out what you think is the next problem to solve with marketing, because then I want to work on that. But I don't know how to do that without starting with an internally consistent philosophy of what exactly the problem is and what we think the problem is and how we're going to solve it. And I can't do that if I'm not able to communicate with you on those things. So when curiosity disappears, man, it just becomes defending your opinion. It's just us against them, and you don't want that. And so you want to keep that thinking going. So maybe the real question is, when you're talking with someone, can this person build strategy? Maybe the better question is, what does this person do when they realize they might be wrong? What do they do when the new information comes? What do they do when their strategy isn't working? What you want is someone who can build on that, who can gain knowledge from everything you're doing, and who has enough experience and strategy mix to be able to say, okay, I think if that's not working, I suspect it's our message, or I suspect it's our media, because I think our brief is strong. I think our people resonate with that message. I think it's going to be media. Let's try split testing some media or something like that. And they're able to create a working hypothesis on what needs to change next. And they're willing to work with you and sales to figure that out. All right. So just remember, when people stop asking questions, they either know everything or they stop thinking. And so what I want to ask you out there, is this something that you think is a problem? I'm considering doing something a little more structured that might benefit leaders, business leaders, in how to hire the right strategist for your role. And I can bring in some recruiter types who can bring some general reality to the situation. I think there needs to be a conversation about how do we hire marketing for the purposes of closing that gap between the C-suite and the rest of marketing. And I think strategy is at the center of that. And if we can't put strategy in front of us all and be able to look at a clean strategy that your marketing leader presents to you and examine it and be able to ask questions about it and understand the assumptions, what's going into it, then it's very difficult to trust marketing. And we end up saying things like, you're the marketing person, I guess it's up to you, right? I guess I'll trust you. Marketing is not a black box. And I think we're leaving a lot on the table when we think that it is. I think the CFO should be able to understand the creative brief, even if they don't agree.